Welcome back to the Blazor Server In-Depth course. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at Bootstrap, which is provided with our Blazor Server app. All right, so let's go over to Visual Studio and let's create a new project, a Blazor app. We're going to say Blazor app, and the solution name is going to be Bootstrap Demo. Make sure you have Blazor app server app, .NET Core 3.1, and HTTPS. Hit create. Now, Bootstrap is a third-party library that's used for laying out web pages and making it a little easier, in fact a lot easier, to have a really nice clean layout. It's one of the most popular layout tools out there. Now, sometimes people want to do their own thing and not use something like Bootstrap, and that is possible to do. It's just to get into authentication, you'll have to override or change all the authentication pages since they by default use Bootstrap. So let's look at where Bootstrap comes in first of all. Let's go to Pages and go to host_host.cs HTML. You'll see right here the only reference to Bootstrap is right here, where it says link to the style sheet bootstrap.min.css. If you notice down here, there is no JavaScript reference. Big deal is you do not want to change major versions. So you don't want to go to Bootstrap 5 when it comes out. You want to stick with Bootstrap 4. But Bootstrap 4.4 is fine. So we'll see how to do that in just a minute. Let's look first at the documentation for Bootstrap so we understand a little better what it does for us. So if you go to getbootstrap.com, this is the Bootstrap documentation page. And quite frankly, this is about the best documentation I've ever seen for just about any product. This is amazing. So right now, they're on version 4.4. That's the major version. If you do a pull down here, you can look at the documentation for other versions of Bootstrap, all the way through previous major versions like version 3.4.1 or even version 2.3.2. So if you're on .NET Framework, you would be using version 3.4.1 at the maximum. There's also themes, official and unofficial, you can get for Bootstrap. But let's look at the documentation, this tab up here. And like I said, the documentation is amazing. First, it walks you through how do you get this on your machine. How do you download it? Where do you get it? You can hit download here. It will take you and actually download the files. Or you can get the source files, or here's the CDN. We'll actually use this to upgrade our version of Bootstrap in just a minute. But first, let's look at what else we have here. So it talks through browsers and supported browsers and types, and basically pretty much everything supports Bootstrap. Now on Windows, they only support Internet Explorer 10 and 11 and Edge, which is actually pretty impressive that they even support that. So there is versions here you can see, but the reality is pretty much everything you use will be supported. So let's go down to layout. This is where we first start to see here's how to use Bootstrap. And the very first thing that is important is layout. The grid system is kind of the foundation of Bootstrap. There's a lot more to it. And if you're just using the grid system, you probably wouldn't want to use all of Bootstrap. But you'll use a lot more than just the layout. But this right here talks about the grid system. So let's look at the grid real quick. The grid allows us to create these different column widths. So in this case, this is a class with 6 and 6 columns. This is 4, 4, and 4, and so on. What happens is there's a total of 12 columns. And then it breaks them apart into either equal chunks, if you just say col, or you can specify, let's down here, you can specify a column, 6 columns versus whatever's left, match those two. All right, so you get to choose what type of columns you use. Up to 12. There's a total of 12 wide. You can say I want to take up, they do a lot of saying, just say column, it's going to basically even things out. But I really like to specify more like this, where we're saying I want 8 columns and I want 4 columns for this. So you're declaring here's how many columns total this section is going to take up. By doing this, you can lay things out in different orders on your screen. And because of what are called media queries, you get to choose how wide those are at different breakpoints or different sizes of screens. And we'll see that in a little bit, where we can actually shrink down the screen and see what it looks like on a phone. And it should look similar, but maybe adjust a little bit based upon how much screen real estate we have to work with. So this is what Bootstrap allows us to do quite simply. Now this isn't a Bootstrap course really. This is more a course on Blazor Server, but Blazor Server makes heavy use of Bootstrap, so I do want to walk you through some of the basics. So we're not going to go into all the detail of column sizes and responsiveness and all the rest, but just note there's a lot of stuff here. I would recommend, as you start needing things, just read through this documentation. You're going to find the section somewhere, probably under layout or content, and maybe components as well. We'll get to that in a minute. So content is where it starts off with, let's say, typography. Sorry. What this is says, okay, this is what an H1 is going to look like in Bootstrap. And so they have some specified sizes for each of the different header tags, which is pretty common. We normally have those sizes anyways, but they've specified what those are. So when you use an H1 tag, it's going to use the Bootstrap sizing for that. Now, you can also use that sizing using the class instead. So class is H1. It will make the sizing the same as an H1, but it won't use the H1 tag. And the importance there is that with screen readers, and the list goes on. You can do that using the built-in Bootstrap stuff. Tables, this is one that is pretty cool. So with tables, you can have a basic table, just using the class of table. But then you can also do things like inverted coloring. So there is a dark table. The one I personally like is this one right here, which is just the inversion for the header. And then so dark for the header and light for the normal theme. But then I typically also add to it the striped. So again, table striped is all you need to do for a class, and you'll see the striping on your table. There's no more you need to mess with. So a lot of this stuff is done for you. We'll get back to images in a minute, but notice this image here. It's actually a responsive image, which means if I shrink down this page, this image is going to shrink down as well. That's because we use the tag image-fluid. And we'll use that as well. Under components, there's a lot of stuff here. So alerts, so these nice colored bands that you can pop up or have on your page somewhere. Badges, so you have these colored badges, which can actually be colors, like so. You can nest them, like so. You can make them pills, make them links. There's a whole bunch of things you can do. Buttons with different size buttons, different color buttons. The big thing here is that Bootstrap really tries hard not to have you write custom CSS, especially not on the page. So instead of saying, I want this color to be hex number, and then specify the hex value, instead you say it's a btn-primary. And you'll see that dash primary quite a bit. Like you'll see text dash primary, and you'll see, I believe it's background or BG primary, something like that. We make the background color the primary color. And so the primary color will be the same color, whether it's for a button or for text or for backgrounds. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different colors that we can then use, but they're standardized. So you can change the color in one spot and have it change for all these different things. Also, you can use these colors in different ways. For example, we can make an outline button. Notice that the button is actually white. Multiple different kinds, sizes, and all the rest. So they provide a ton of stuff here, much more than I can cover in this course, but it's something that I would encourage you to look through as you need more user interface elements. Don't just go out and get a new theme. Start with looking at what this can do first, and then maybe add a theme on top of it if you need to. Also, don't think that Bootstrap is just for that grid. There's a ton more that it does. Okay, so that's the documentation for Bootstrap. I'm going to leave that open, but I'm going to take it off a screen, and we're going to start looking at how we can use this. So first of all, if we open up bootstrap.min.css, notice that we're on 4.3.1. We're going to update that a little bit, but just note that that's not quite the latest version. There's actually a minor revision later that we can upgrade to. Okay, so let's go to the index.razor page. Here's our page, not a lot to it. So let's add something here to make it a little more fun. Let's add a table. In fact, let's go over here. Instead of watching me type this, under Content, Tables, let's go down and let's actually pick this first table right here. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste this in right here. Now, first of all, it's going to make this text go right on top of the table. Not a big fan of that, so I'm going to cut this out and make it a paragraph. Welcome to your new app. So there's our table. It's got some lines in between, and it looks kind of not bad. It looks pretty good. In fact, if we hit F12, if you're not familiar with F12, F12 is the developer tools, which allow you to make modifications to your existing HTML page. Now, these modifications don't save back to your source code. They just allow you to modify whatever is currently on the page. Now, I say F12. If you're in other browsers besides Chrome, it might be slightly different. I believe Edge is still F12. I'm not sure what Firefox is. It might be Control F12, not sure. But you get to your developer tools. You can also go to the menu here, and under more tools, you'll find developer tools, which actually says Control Shift, looks like I. But F12 works just fine. So on my Elements tab here, I can go to the far left and use this element selector. Every browser tool has something similar. So you can select this, and then you can come over and you can make a selection on the page. And it allows you to kind of drill down and find something. In this case, I'm finding the header row, but I really want to go up a couple levels and find that table. Let's take this class off and Control X. That's what it would look like if I didn't use any CSS from Bootstrap. All right, kind of just a little ugly, little small, little blah. But because I said class, I have to modify this as HTML now, class equals table, it makes it wider, it puts some spacing in there, it makes it just look a whole lot snazzier. But let's make it also table-striped. And now we notice we have these gray stripes on our table. Now remember how I said I like to have the inverted header? I think that really pops, makes it look nice. I don't remember what the tag for that is, so I can come down to the documentation. Now, I am not using the browser sync tools, so browser link is disabled. And the reason why is because right now with Blazor server, it's not working exactly the way it should. And so I haven't enabled browser sync, because if I do, it causes some quirky issues. The theory is that if you made a change and saved it over in your ASP.NET document or page, then it would refresh this page and you'd see the new values. That's a cool in theory, but when the tools don't work, you don't enable it. So we'll see this on the next refresh. Now, if you went away and came back, notice it's kind of cleared that out because it doesn't save those changes we made. It just allows us to see it while it's on the page. However, if I were to restart this app, now that I have made those changes on the page, we will see that, in fact, they are now permanent, which is great. I like that a lot more. Now, what if I wanted to have this table, but I also wanted to have to the right of the table that cat picture I had before? So let's put this table on only half the page and put a cat picture on the other half of the page, because why not? All right? That gives us some practice with a few different things. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this out. So Control X, and I'm going to have a div with a class equals row. And then in here, so that indicates one row of a grid, I'm going to have a div with a class equal to call dash, let's make it call dash MD dash 6. And the reason why is because I want this to be 6 wide as long as it's a medium width or larger page. But if it's smaller than medium width, I want to use the whole section. So there's my first column, and I'll paste in my table. And now my second column, so div class equals call dash MD dash 6. In here, I want my image. So let's copy in our cat image. So I will create a folder called images. And I'm going to paste in my cat image. I'll drag that on here. And remember to take off those first two characters. So now it's images/cat.jpg. But remember back in Bootstrap, there was some stuff about images. According to images, responsive images. I want a responsive image because a responsive image, what it does is it sets the max width to be 100% and the height to be auto, so that it scales with the parent element. I like that. Well, that's just class equals img-fluid. So we can put that class in place, like so. And now let's run this again. So I've created 2 columns in one row, and I've put my image in one and my table in the other. So now, even when I shrink this down, notice how it kind of shrinks up. There's a little bit of overlap there we'd have to deal with, have to play around, probably make that a large column instead of a medium column. But then right there, notice it pops to this is now on top and the image is down below, which works out well. All right. Now, even cooler is in the browser tools, if you hit F12, you can shrink this down. There's this right next to the element selector is a toggle device toolbar in Chrome. Again, this is Chrome that I'm using. If I click this, it shows me what this looks like on an iPhone 6, 7, or 8. Notice all it is a resolution. So this is the resolution for an iPhone 6, 7, or 8. I could say, what does it look like an iPhone X? Like that. How about an iPad? Oh, it's more like that. We got that overlap issue. Oop, we got to fix that. So we could fix that issue probably by going back. In fact, let's turn this off again. I'm going to select let's select the cat. And now instead of call-MD, let's do, I believe it's LG for large. And we'll do the same thing down here. And now it should be that when we shrink this down, notice how now on an iPad, it is properly putting it underneath instead of overlaying those two values. Then we go to the iPhone X, it's still underneath. Galaxy S5, it looks pretty good in all of these. And notice our menu is now at the top too, by the way, because our menu is part of that responsive relaying out of things based upon the width of the screen, which is called a media query. A media query just says how wide is a screen, and based upon that, what CSS do you want to apply? All right, so with all of these, we get to see what all of them look like, or general resolutions. If you have a different resolution you want to try, you can go to either responsive and choose the resolution, or you can edit here and add your own. Also note we can rotate this. So you see what it looks like in a rotated mode. There's the rotation. For responsive, let's do an iPhone X. We'll rotate it, and that's what it looks like in a rotated mode. Right? Now what would happen if our image wasn't marked as fluid? So let's just take that out. Notice it messed the screen up here. And look at that. That's what it would look like. You'd have to scroll over and down and around in order to see our cat picture because it wasn't marked as fluid. It's even made our table look weird because it's now scrolling across the screen. So even in this wide mode, we still have this scroll issue. That's why we want to have our images fluid, because then it doesn't do that. We don't have that scroll issue. And even when we go to a let's do this. Let's go to File Explorer and let's look at this file. This file is 153 kilobytes. That is tiny. And that gives us all of that styling. So don't think just because it's a common thing that a lot of people use that it's something you have to throw out and do your own. Because I promise you, if you do all the stuff that Bootstrap does, you'll get a file that's even larger. Okay, they have done a lot of work to make this as small as possible. So use that, get started with it, try it out, play around with it. But remember I said that this isn't the latest version. This is 4.3.1. How do we update this? Well, one way, if we go to _host.cs_html, we see that's where we're bringing the Bootstrap in. Well, if I comment this out, first of all, I want to show you our app would look horrible. So let's do that. That's just ugly. Okay? In fact, if you shrink this down, it still does collapse, but it doesn't collapse and actually close this. It just makes a different size. Our table is rough. Our image is awful. Even our logo up here looks horrible. So Bootstrap provides us a lot of stuff. But let's bring in the new version. If we go back, and I can paste this in place. That's a pretty long thing, but it's got an integrity check on it. That's why. And there's our path to the CDN. Now, this does mean that if that were to go down, that your site would look horrible. But you can create fallbacks if you really need to. What this also does mean, though, is that since you're using a CDN, that you gain the ability for caching at multiple different levels on the internet. So we hit run again. And now our layout will look great again. And it's like nothing changed from our other version of the CDN. Oops, we didn't change those columns. Let's change those because otherwise, so it's LG and LG. That's one of the problems of modifying in using the F12 browser tools is that if you do too many changes and you don't document them some way, you'll forget that you did them. And then when you run it the next time, you go, oh, whoops, that's not right. And you have to recreate all those changes that you did. So just remember to write them down in some way. But now if we shrink this down, notice the picture never overlaps, even at the smallest it can get before it goes down underneath. So, looking great, not a lot of work. Okay, so now we've got the latest version of Bootstrap. It didn't break anything because it was a minor revision, not a major revision. Now, one thing that is not brought into our HTML or host.cshtml file is the JavaScript for Bootstrap. There is JavaScript in here. Notice this second one right here, script, is bootstrap.min.js. And if you're using that, don't forget to include these two versions as well, one of jQuery and one of popper.js. If you want to use some of the advanced stuff in here, let's find out, for example, alerts. Notice for alerts, it says for inline dismissal, use alerts jQuery plugin. All right, and what that is right down here. So you can see an alert, and you have this little X. You click the X button, and it goes away. All right, you can also trigger alerts that pop up using jQuery or JavaScript. And so there's things you can do with JavaScript, and in order to do that, you would need to bring in the bootstrap.min.js file and also these two files as well. These two files come first, and then your bootstrap.min.js. Okay? And then you'd have access to do those additional things. It's up to you if you want to bring those in. It does mean a little more overhead to your app, but quite frankly, it's not that much. And again, you get a lot of nice functionality for it. So make those decisions based upon what you think is going to work for you. Now, I did say JavaScript, and we're in a Blazor server app. One of the things about Blazor server is the idea that it can run C# in the browser. And so you can not have to use JavaScript, right? Well, mostly, that's true. But there may be times or reasons to use JavaScript still. The nice thing is you don't have to use JavaScript for data display or manipulation. Instead, you would use JavaScript for the manipulation of a DOM, okay, the document object model. Meaning, if you want to make maybe a header grow bigger and smaller and kind of pulse, that would be JavaScript, not Blazor server or C#. Okay, so there is still use for JavaScript in here, but you don't have to use it. Blazor Server allows you to go back to the model that we used to have, which is that JavaScript is used to elevate your page, but it's not necessarily necessary. Okay? You don't have to have additional JavaScript in order to make your page work. You just can have it if you want to add some nice functionality like that inline close button on that error page. All right? And there's some pop-ups and other things you can do with Bootstrap. So just note that you don't have to, but if you want to, you would put it right down here where you put your JavaScript, and you would put these two right here first, and then this script afterwards. Now there is one script down here that is our blazor.server.js, which is looking for it in the frameworks _framework folder, which does not seem to exist. Well, that's because this is a file we don't change. That is for our SignalR connection. All right, that's it for this lesson. That's all about Bootstrap in Blazor. I have a hard time remembering which one to say first. Bootstrap in Blazor. So we can configure Bootstrap. We can upgrade Bootstrap if we want to, or use it from a CDN. We can then use it on our different pages to allow us to create some pretty impressive layouts and other things like striped and dark and all the rest, or in this case down here, responsive through Fluid. We can do all this stuff using the class items in our different elements. So that Bootstrap allows us to do all these things without having to write custom CSS. Now, the one thing I didn't touch on, but that you should know, is that if you want to make a change to Bootstrap, what you would do is actually go to site.css, which we talked about before, and you could make a change to the font family or something else, and that will override the settings in Bootstrap. Okay, so there are changes you can make, and there's already a bunch of changes in here that overwrite what we currently have, but this allows you to change Bootstrap without having to change the actual CSS file, because as we saw in here, when you replace a CSS file, you would actually overwrite those changes. So you don't want to do that. All right, so that's what site.css is for. Okay, so that's it. Time to practice what you've learned. Try out the different tags. Read through that documentation. Trust me, it's actually, maybe it's just me, but it's quite fun. There's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of power you can use that, again, takes even a low-level designer to the next level because of what's already been done for you. Okay, so try it out. Try a few of those things out and get comfortable with what Bootstrap can do for you. Okay, then come on back for the next lesson.